Welcome back to This Was Supposed to Be Easy, your go-to podcast for connection, joy, and a good dose of laughter.
Hosted by two friends who've seen enough of life to know that it's never as simple as it sounds.
Or looks.
Each conversation celebrates the diverse journeys we travel, the moments of bravery, the strength we didn't know we had, and the joy we find along the way.
Because let's be honest, life is full of things that were supposed to be easy, but turned out to be harder.
And definitely funnier
than we thought. This is Amy.
And this is Cheryl. And if it were easy, we wouldn't be here. Today, we're starting something special, a 2-part episode. Our conversation was so rich and full of insights that we didn't want to cut it short. So settle in and enjoy the first half of this amazing chat. We promise you'll want to come back for the rest.
So I keep hearing this word, and it has come up for me. And I realized I was at a meeting yesterday and we had a presenter and they kept bringing up this word. And I was doing some coursework this week and that word kept coming up. And then I was even thinking back on some of my most recent podcasts and this word kept coming up. And that is the word listening. And I realized that people were kind of talking about all different areas of listening, but they were really talking about it as a skill and how some people are really bad at it and some people are really good at it. And so it got me to thinking it is a skill, but it's with all skills, we can get better and we can develop them. And so I was thinking about our listeners today and especially how people can even make a joke out of listening. Like, oh, he's such a bad listener. I was saying this or that. She was such a bad listener. She was doing this or that. And so I just thought, you know what? I don't know if we've ever really I know we've touched on listening in other topics, but I don't know if we've ever talked about listening as a whole concept in itself. So I was wondering if maybe we could bring that to the table today.
I love that and am thinking about how this topic could take days to cover, right?
Right.
There are people who research listening for their entire career. So obviously, we're not here to come with those extensive facts and figures, but probably more of our experiences, like the ones you were thinking about yesterday, or the conversations that we've recently had, thoughts that we've had, experiences that we regret, all of those things. I think it's just an entry point into what could be an ongoing conversation.
Certainly. One of the kind of pathways that really got me thinking yesterday as I was in this presentation, it started off in kind of a different way than most conversations on listening come from. And it was that the way you listen and even process speech in the way of listening can be part of your culture, but not necessarily the culture in which like you think of, oh, you know, that person is from that country, even though all of that can matter too, but even just the culture of your family. So meaning that if you grew up in a household where everyone was speaking and so you had to speak louder in order to be heard, or if you grew up in a culture where children were seen and not heard, so maybe your voice didn't hold the same weight that other people's did, so people weren't listening to you because you were the child. We talk about listening all the time when it comes to our early childhood skills, right? And kids being heard and so but how does that impact you then as an adult when you have to think about listening and how that might be?
Yeah, I honestly, as I sit here thinking about it right now, am sort of having this mental block. I'm not sure that I can tell you much in the moment about my own growing up culture around listening. It's not coming to me, but maybe a story will come to me later. But what I am thinking about is probably where some of the collide has happened between merging my experiences along with my husband's experiences and his family. And so I say this with all love to everyone in his family, but when even just a small gathering, say, you know, just 3, 4 people having coffee in the morning, I can sit and observe everyone talking at the same time and just continuing to talk, like you said, sort of talk louder or talk longer, right? Like, oh, they haven't stopped talking yet, so I've got to keep my sentence going, kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah.
And actually I've had a few points in time where I'm like, I'm going to not participate in coffee on such and such a morning, if there's a gathering of some sort, just because I don't have the capacity right now to listen to everyone else not listening. There
Right.
are times when I can find humor in it, and there are times when I just cannot even observe it. And I say all of that to also say at the same time, my husband and I will then get in arguments because I'll cut him off and say something because I anticipated what he was going to say, or I didn't think he was going down the track that I wanted him to be going down. And we'll get in an argument about why aren't you listening to me? And I'm like, like you never listen. What's going on right now? But
Right.
I do realize though that whether it's a part of who I've always been or I've picked some of it up or it's my way to try to be heard in those scenarios, I don't know, but it's something I've thought about as I've caught myself literally saying to you sometimes, saying to other friends, I just cut you off. I'm sorry, but let me finish also,
Right. It makes me think too, I've become more hyper aware, I think, of my listening since having an ADHD diagnosis
Mhm.
because I know I was the cutter offer, like, but in the same way, because my brain was already processing like what the person was saying, and I thought I knew the outcome. And so then I was like, oh, well, they're going to just finish it off like this. And so I can move on to, or I can say my piece because then I can make the connection. And I didn't realize for the longest time of what a bad habit that was because it was just who I was and that's how I spoke. And so having through different studies and readings, like you said, there's people's entire careers that are dedicated to this. And so as I've started taking in some of that information, especially as I was kind of learning how to become a better coach and better at leadership and all of that type of stuff, I catch myself now doing it before I do it. It's funny though, because then I have the internal monologue going of Amy, just listen, be in the moment. You do not need to be thinking about what is coming next. You do not need to be asking a question. You do not need to, like, so unless it is, to keep them talking about that. But then I also have to be mindful too of like, why am I listening? Am I listening to respond where I need to like take in all am I listening for education on something? Am I in a meeting and somebody is telling me about like their key point on a project? Like, why am I listening? And sometimes if I put my brain in that type of focus,
Mhm.
I can do it. But it's interesting though that you brought up those family conversations because then it makes me think like what would be your reasoning for listening in that moment? Like so if you also maybe are like, yeah, they're gonna just talk all over each other and it's gonna like you might also be able to say, like, yeah, I have nothing, I'm not gonna have value added. And also, they don't need me to listen to just kind of do the thing that they're going to do in that minute or in that time.
Mhm. I've actually found myself jumping in a few times, like, to stop for a second. You asked a question and so and so is trying to answer it and no one's listening. So let's just hear, like, let the sentence finish. And actually, gosh, I hope it's okay that I say these things. Kevin's father had cancer,
Mhm.
more than 20 years ago, and very strongly has shared over time that because of the chemotherapy, his brain is foggier. And in addition to that, as he ages, it takes him longer to process. There are things that are harder to think through. And sometimes when he's trying to articulate his thoughts or even his question about something, he has to think and speak and it comes out slower. And in a lot of cases, people aren't willing to just wait for the whole thing to finish. And I think sometimes that's where I jump in and just be like, stop. He's still talking. let him finish. And again, I don't want to sound like a defender or a savior because I literally catch myself in many circumstances. Okay, I'm going to say this. Have you ever left a lunch with a friend or something like that, and later on thought about a conversation you had and realized you can't remember if it ended? Like, did
Yes.
it finish? And
I just had well, and there I go cutting off, but I literally just had this situation happen this week. So,
did you?
yes,
I
yes,
I
I
I
have.
wanna hear it because literally when that happens to me, I think 2 things, that both scenarios I wasn't listening, right? But is it that I stopped listening and we didn't finish the conversation and they walked away offended? Or was it that my brain started doing something else and I wasn't listening and the conversation did carry out and end, but I don't remember at all how it ended? And either way, I'm horrified at myself, but tell me about your experience if you can.
I can. Yes, it was just the other week. I was having lunch with a mutual friend of ours, and we had been talking about a handful of different things. And so we very well might have squirreled away from multiple conversations
Mhm,
as we were talking. But in that, I remember driving home and I'm like, I wonder whatever happened with like that story that they were talking about. Like,
mhm.
did they finish it? Did we ever? And in fact, that's become kind of a pattern at times with certain things that I remember with a different friendship group. Like last year, I would actually find myself texting one of the people that I would say, I realized we never finished the conversation of like you were sharing the story. What happened there? Oh, ha ha ha, yeah, this, or this happened. But I started going back to be like, I don't know what happened, but like it was almost like there were four of us, and then all of a sudden we all got talking, and then the person who was sharing the story, like their story never ended. So like now I've tried to make it a habit to go back and say like, how did that story end? Or, what did happen? Or how did you feel about that? Because I'm like, I don't think we ever finished. Like and the amount of times that I can say that I have had half conversations with people that never truly wrapped up, and with good friends sometimes your conversations are that it's almost like a comma versus a period. It's the like to be
Mhm.
continued at our next event. But if people don't always know that, like it makes me think about, so you have children that are in kind of that dating age or bringing good friends maybe to the table of family, and I do too. It makes me think about when you bring somebody in to your family's type of conversations or conversation style, what that might look like. Like I remember I had some friends way back in high school, and one of the friends at the time, his father was super sarcastic, which, now I have a husband who's very super sarcastic at times. And I have my own feelings on sarcasm. Well, that's a whole nother conversation for another
Remind
day.
me to tell
But
a Jeremy story at the
yeah,
end of this.
yes, exactly. But with sarcasm, it made me think like, is it safe to talk? Like, is this a like, like I remember this dad I would call and can I talk to so and so? And they would say, I don't know, can you? That type of thing. But it always was like, oh, okay, haha. But then there would be other things. And if I ever, how was school today? Oh, well, this, but then it would come back with a really sarcastic. And I had to realize, like, okay, this is just the way the person is when I go over to, but like I wasn't prepared for that, right? So it was a whole different way of conversing and listening and having some of those conversations that wasn't my experience. But I had a similar experience when my extended family came to visit, that you had kind of mentioned, where everybody talked over each other and they got really loud and they'd talk faster to make sure that they could get their pieces in to be heard. And then they'd get louder and they'd get louder. And I remember there was a few times where I'm like, I need to step outside. And it was like, well, what's wrong? And it's like, everybody's so loud and I can't process all these conversations happening at the same time. And yeah, it's very different.
As you say all of those things, I can't tell you, like, I literally had to start writing names of people, because you talked about our friends, the friends of our children
Mhm.
coming to family gatherings or events. And I instantly thought of my daughter's friend, Claire, she's been up here for the last couple 4th of July holidays. And 2 years ago, we went out to eat breakfast before they left town, and we were trying to make some decisions about our t shirt design for the upcoming Nelson Week
Mhm.
event. And it got a little heated, different opinions. And Claire just sat there watching. And my nephew Daly was sitting there, and he was much, I feel like I've told this story before. I don't know, but he was much more familiar with some of the family conversational dynamics. But the two of them just sat there, and as it went too far for my comfort level, especially in a restaurant, not loud, but just people getting angry. And
Emotional.
and yeah, but afterwards, I was so impressed that Claire felt comfortable saying, "You all need to learn how to communicate." Almost like I've never seen anything like this. No one was listening to anybody. And I brought it up again this year when she was up, and she I mean, it was clear in her memory, the whole way that it went down and the thoughts that she had about it. So definitely, hearing that outsider's perspective, I think is important in a lot of ways. And the other story that you made me think of is already gone. The train has left the station on that one, but it'll probably come back to me.
It probably will, and please jump in when it does come back,
Cut you off.
or I'll get a text from you at 2 in the morning that says, "I remember I
Yes.
remember what it was." Yeah. And I think too, as we're talking about it, we're hitting on a lot of different things that even go kind of beyond listening. Like listening, I think the bigger conversation is communication, right? So like as we're even saying that, so where we say like we could have multiple conversations, I think we will eventually, because listening is one of those like cornerstone pieces of communication, but it is its kind of own thing as well. And so as we are talking, we're talking about kind of like the bigger umbrella of communication, but it's so poignant and remembrant when, or you remember it when people aren't listening, right? Like I think about a few people in my own life where, and I'm guilty of this too at times. I've just tried really hard not to, but cell phones being a distraction,
Yeah.
like if we're having a conversation, I know I need to like put my phone out of my hand, because if I'm even tempted to look at it, one, I'm clearly being rude, but two, I know I'm not going to hear, because it's one of those things where like I can pretend I'm listening to you, but you're going to ask me a question, and realistically, I'm not going to have taken anything in.
I've been turning mine upside down lately so that I don't see it light up. If I hear just one buzz, I know it's not like an urgent announcement or whatever. Whereas if I hear it vibrate like a ring, I can at least quick look and see if it's urgent, but that I can at least visually take the distraction down a notch.
Couple of years ago, I used to have, because of a health program with work, I used to have the watch where your text messages could come
Mhm,
into, and I finally had to get rid of it
mhm.
because I found that it was driving me insane to have my wrist buzz, or have something, and it was making me a terrible listener. I shouldn't say it was making me. It wasn't helping me in my list, like in my journey to become a better listener, because I was constantly looking at my watch. But then I think I was sending the message of not even that the text was a distraction, but that like their timing was off, like that this was a bad time to talk. Like, because I think that's something that when we're talking about listening, more people, in my opinion, need to do. And it's this: if you don't have the time to give that person to listen, then state that up front, and then kind of make the decision of, is this the right time to have that conversation or not?
Yeah.
Because sometimes, so I used to be terrible about this, especially when Jeremy and I were first married. I would want to start a really serious conversation like when we'd climb into bed at night. Like my brain would be like ruminating or thinking about all the things for the day. And then I would usually like knock out some insane, crazy question that came out of left field. Like, why do you love me? Like something stupid that I shouldn't have in that moment. And he's like, I'm half asleep. What are you like? It was not the time. It was not the time to have that conversation. And so I think too, like knowing okay, this is going to be a serious conversation that we're going to probably need to talk about for a little while. Like, is this a good time to have that conversation? Or, this is a really funny story. Let me tell it to you real quick. Okay, because yeah, I can listen. You have about 5 minutes,
Yes.
but saying that up front, like, I have a meeting that starts in 5 minutes. I can give you 5 minutes of uninterrupted time for me, but literally that's all I can give. But I can come back in an hour after my meeting
Mm-hmm.
or something like that. And what that might look like, because I think too often when we're doing the listening, we don't put those parameters around it. So then we might not know how to cut it off without being rude. And I know I use that terminology rude, but like in any way that's kind of socially awkward. So then it's like, oh, wow, we were just talking for 20 minutes and now I'm 15 minutes late for a meeting, or I'm 15 minutes late for
Amy,
another
are
conversation.
you describing this morning?
I'm not, I promise. I'm not. As your face just changed, I'm like, oh no, that's not
No,
what I'm saying.
no.
But it
It,
is that like parameter, the parameters of it, but that's so hard to do, right?
Right,
It's too
right. Well,
hard.
and so just to clarify for people who are listening, Amy and I had an appointment this morning to record a podcast, and my neighbors who live out of town arrived last night. And 10 minutes before our appointment, I saw them walking across the yard with their coffee and their nothing bunt cakes that, cupcakes that they had brought up. And I was like, oh, I want to talk to them, but I have an appointment with Amy. And was one of those, I don't know if ethical dilemma is taking it too far, right? But is this one of those moments where, like Simon Sinek says, you shouldn't push off your friends all the time, but I was going to do that. Amy was very gracious. I'm like, can I have an extra 15 or 20 minutes? And then I got that far. I'm like, okay, can I have another 30 minutes? I promise, like, I will come back. But man, it was so great to visit with them for that hour. So I'm thanking you for that, giving me that, allowing me to postpone our meeting. But it was one of those scenarios, right, where I had to make this decision. Like, I really do want to sit and visit with my neighbor. And can I adjust my time schedule a little bit so that I can give the time that I want to give to that, and then hopefully Amy and I can meet up a little bit later.
Well, but that is a great point that you bring up. You knew in that moment that you were going to want longer with these
Mm.
people, right? Like you
Yeah.
wanted that conversation to happen. I said right up front, hey, I have nothing going on, I'm just doing some stuff. Like you let me know when you're available and I'll make it work. And so this wasn't a big deal at all, but like I think about the distraction sometimes of people who feel torn, then they don't want to text the person. They
Mhm.
would just be late instead because then they feel weird about like, oh, well, if I text them or if I call them and say like, hey, I'm going to be a little bit late, like that might be weird, but I don't want to tell these people that I can't talk to them. So then it becomes a much messier situation than it needs to be, right? Where like sometimes, again, just being upfront and having that communication be there, it's like, hey, that's awesome. That's great. That's the perfect way where not everybody does that. So that I think is another skill that's kind of developable as we talk about some of those things.
Yeah. Yeah. So I believe that we have some, I don't know, tips or other things to share, but I do have a couple more maybe funny, but not so funny, I don't know, stories, right?
Yeah.
Like you mentioned the watch and having to stop wearing the watch. And because I haven't yet made the decision to have the watch where my text messages come to my wrist, although I've contemplated it more so, not because I want the messages, but that I might want it for the warrant, it's time for you to stand up or move around a little bit kinds of nudges that I need in my day. I am still a person, I'm going to age myself here, right? But when someone looks at their watch, the message I receive is, "Oh, they've got to go."
Right. Me too. Yes.
Yeah, and sometimes I catch myself and remind myself, "Oh, no, 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 they're just getting a buzz, it's buzzing," and telling them something, but I have to catch it, and I guess I'm saying that out loud to reiterate what you said, which is there are still a whole lot of people older than me who are also probably receiving those messages and also receiving those messages when I pick up my phone and do something with my phone because they aren't users of cell phones or common users of cell phones. And so it's just a good reminder to me about those messages. And I was at a meeting this week at our state capitol. And well, you were there for about 5 minutes, I think, but at the
Right,
same time
right.
as me. I think we have a picture of it.
Mhm.
But I was sitting next to a friend and colleague who recently got hearing aids. I've seen her post about this on social media, but I hadn't been in the same room with her since she got the hearing aids. And at one point, she leaned over to me and she said, "Are you tired of hearing all the conversations happening at the other tables? It's like
Mm.
having such a hard time listening to the speaker." I wasn't hearing the conversations at the table behind us, but because of her new hearing aids, her sensory overload is how she's described it. She's like, "I'm hearing so many things that I wasn't hearing before, and I'm just realizing there's this conversation happening here, and there's this whispering happening over there, and it's too much. I can't hear all of those things and focus on the person I'm trying to listen to," which was a perspective I needed to hear because it makes me more aware of times when I might be whispering and maybe distracting someone.
That is interesting because I have participated in those conversations as well, where it's like, okay, I should probably be paying more attention to the listener. I've also been the speaker in those situations, and then
Yeah.
I almost want to be like, "What are we talking about over
Yeah.
here?" Like, yeah, but really thinking about it from hearing aid perspective, like this is someone that is kind of relearning how to and what that experience is like for them, I think is really interesting in the capacity of actual sound, right? Like not just
Mhm.
the mental process, because I'm sure, yes, that could be very exhausting too, of like maybe thinking or processing what the person was saying, but like actually hearing the noises and that is really interesting.
One of the reasons that we decided to talk about this, or at least start talking about this now, was because of our recent conversation with Suzanne as we thought about niceness and kindness. And one of the things Suzanne said was that kindness can't be taught. It's something that is, I don't know what word she used, but I'm going to say grown. So it grows within you as you learn how to or learn about listening was one of the things that she mentioned. She mentioned being curious.
Mhm.
She mentioned interaction with other people. She talked about her threads of teaching and learning, but when she said that piece about listening as an essential skill that we should be thinking about in terms of supporting the development of kindness and empathy and caring about other people, it's been on my mind. And I pulled open the book that she wrote that I use in my class, and she has a whole chapter on listening, and the very first line of the chapter I want to read because it says, "If I were forced to boil down my pedagogical approach in just two words, I would choose play and listening."
Mm.
Right? And again, that just is, it's circling a lot in my mind as we work to, grow our curiosity and expand our thinking and be new at things. All of those things take an open mind, and I'll add ears to that, right? Like to literally make an actual effort to try to hear what another person is saying and hear it with the intention of understanding their perspective or their experience. There's a quote that says, "Listening is being able to be changed." by another person, by
I like that.
M. Scott Peck, in case, anyone wants to know where that came from. But that's something I know I fail at on a regular basis. But
Too.
I just want to be brave enough to say that I know that I fail at that, and that I want and desire to build that skill myself, and be thinking about that in not only my work with children or on behalf of children, but also in my interactions with others.
Thanks for tuning in to This Was Supposed to Be Easy. Remember, the best stories are the ones we live.
Don't forget to like, subscribe, and keep the conversation going, because life may not be easy, but listening in should be.
Stay curious, stay connected, and keep wondering.